When your wife flinches at your hug and whispers, "God, don't," you don't just lose affection, you lose your marriage. It happened in the soft hour between afternoon and evening, when the sun is still stubborn in the sky, but the lamps are already thinking about turning on. I came up behind her in the hallway with the easy certainty of 10 married years and slipped my hands around her waist like I'd done 1,000 times without asking permission. My fingers had barely touched the hem of her sweater when her shoulders locked. She pulled in a sharp breath, the kind you take when you expect pain, and let out those 2 words I will never unhear. I hadn't meant the moment to carry any weight. I wasn't angling for anything. I'd just finished changing the air filter in the hallway return, still smelled faintly like dust and the cardboard of the new filter sleeve, and I wanted to touch my wife, the way people in safe homes reach for each other without thinking. My hands froze mid-hold, palms hovering. She took half a step forward, just enough to be out of range, and walked into our bedroom without turning her head. I stayed in the hallway staring at my fingers like they'd betrayed me. The house hummed, fridge compressor, dryer click, a truck rolling past on our street. And somehow all of it sounded like proof I had imagined something. I wanted it to be a misunderstanding. Maybe the dog's toy underfoot startled her. Maybe she'd burned her arm on the curling iron earlier. Maybe anything other than what it was. I followed her as far as the threshold and stopped there. She was at her dresser, reorganizing the top drawer with the bored focus of someone alphabetizing a pain they don't plan to acknowledge. The sweater she wore was one I'd bought her last winter, oatmeal-colored, soft enough to make a person generous. She moved like the fabric belonged to a stranger. I could have asked what that was about. I could have tapped the bruise and demanded she name the color. Instead, I did the thing I'm best at. I absorbed it. I told myself to grab the toolbox I'd left by the vent and get on with my evening. I lectured myself about long weeks and stress and the fact that static shocks will make anyone twitch in February. I argued against my own eyes. At the kitchen sink, I ran water over hands that didn't need washing and watched the suds turn the steel gray. The window over the sink holds a slice of our backyard fence and the neighbor's maple that's always a few weeks ahead of ours in spring. A blue jay landed on the top slat, tilted its head, and then left like it had found nothing worth seeing. I dried my hands, set the towel straight, and let the quiet roll in. We used to make a ritual out of that time of day. She'd come home, shoes kicked off with a happy little huff, and shoulder me out of the way at the stove to taste whatever I had going. Sometimes she'd hum, not a tune I recognized, just the easy noise of a person who forgot to be unhappy. And I'd touch her back, as light as a question, and she'd lean into it as if I'd answered yes. There's a difference between distance and rejection. Distance is a phase, a busy month, a family crisis. Rejection is a reflex, the body voting before the mind can hold a debate. Standing there with a dish towel in my hand, I knew which one I had just witnessed. I also knew how quick I was to pretend I hadn't. Dinner became one of those quiet negotiations married people learn to navigate without words. I made pasta because it was neutral, because it didn't require decisions beyond salt or no salt. I left the pot on the stove and called out that it was ready. She murmured thanks from the bedroom and ate in there, another new habit wrapped in the label of just finishing something. I ate at the counter, my back to the hallway, and listened to forks tap ceramic like distant rain. Later, when I slid into bed, I made a point to lie on my edge, an exaggerated carefulness that looked like respect and felt like exile. She came in after brushing her teeth and climbed under the covers with the clinical efficiency of a nurse tucking a patient in for the night. We stared in the same general direction, toward the vague square of moonlight on the wall, but without actually seeing the same room. I've spent most of my life persuading myself that problems shrivel if you deprive them of attention. I'm the son of a mechanic and a lunch lady. You tighten the bolt, you keep the line moving. You don't take a day off because a feeling decided it wanted to stall you out. But lying there, my hands polite on my own chest, I learned something ugly. Indifference grows in the dark. It drinks quiet like water. If this was a single misfire, it would have faded by morning. But even then, even in the hour it happened, my body treated it like a boundary etched in stone. I didn't reach across the bed. I didn't test the air between us to see if it would spark. I watched the clock project green numbers on the ceiling and tried to imagine a version of the day where she hadn't said what she said, where my hands were harmless, where I could still pretend. I'm not proud of how long I lay still, waiting for her to break the silence. I wanted her to laugh the way she used to pat my arm and say she was sorry, that it wasn't about me, that she'd been jumpy and she didn't know why, and could we watch something dumb together before bed? She didn't. The room filled up with the simplest truth I've ever hated. People tell you who they are, with what they do when they think it doesn't count. Somewhere after midnight, the heater kicked on, and the vents shivered. She rolled away from me a little more, as if the warm air itself had pushed her. I tried to place the moment on a timeline I could understand. After the new responsibilities at her job, after her latest burst of fitness obsession, after the way her phone had grown a second skin and lived in her palm. I told myself there would be a reason in there that would let me label the scene temporary. But I already knew. You don't recoil from a hug by accident. You don't whisper, "God, don't," unless that sentence has practiced itself in your mouth. You don't turn your back to someone's reaching hands unless you've been facing elsewhere for a while. When sleep finally came, it arrived in short, unkind loops. Every time I woke, I was exactly where I'd started, one arm's length from a wife who handled me like a live wire. By morning, there was no plan, no confrontation, no dramatic vow. Just a line I hadn't wanted drawn, now cutting the bed in half. That was the first moment I became a stranger in my own house. The night she flinched from my touch kept looping in my head. I'd reach out in memory, like I had 100 times before, and instead of warmth, I'd feel that recoil. It wasn't just about that one moment. It cracked open a vault of comparison. I remembered the girl I had fallen in love with, the one who used to curl into me during Sunday naps, her hand resting naturally on my chest as if that was its rightful place. Back then, she would tug my sleeve if I wasn't paying attention, or kiss me mid-conversation just because. She wasn't shy about affection. She was the one who taught me that love could be loud and soft at the same time. But over the last year, I started noticing shifts, subtle at first. She stopped holding my hand in the grocery store. She began turning her cheek when I kissed her, like lips to lips had suddenly become too much. Nights we used to spend tangled in bed were replaced with her side of the mattress cooling earlier and earlier, as if she couldn't wait to escape me in sleep. At first, I rationalized it. Stress, work, the seasons of a marriage. Every couple goes through ebbs and flows, right? That's what I told myself as I held on to the hope that it was temporary, that the woman who once chose me so eagerly would circle back. But as I replayed that whisper, "God, don't," I realized it wasn't just distance. It was rejection, carved deep. A conscious rejection of me, the very man she had once sworn to love. And the worst part was, remembering her warmth didn't comfort me. It only made the present colder. One evening, a few weeks after that moment in the hallway, she showed me a picture on her phone. It was a group photo from a work dinner, or so she claimed. Smiling faces, raised glasses, the kind of snapshot you post online to remind everyone that your life is full of laughter and camaraderie. At first glance, it seemed harmless. She stood at the edge of the group, her smile practiced, her posture casual. But my eyes caught on the details that photos don't mean to reveal. A man's arm lingered behind her, almost brushing her shoulder. She wasn't leaning toward him, not obviously, but there was something in the way her body angled, something that felt rehearsed. She tapped the screen, pointing out the decorations on the table, laughing about how her boss ordered too much wine. I nodded, played along, but the image had already imprinted itself in my mind. Later that night, when she left her phone on the nightstand, I found myself staring at it, tempted to scroll back and see more. But I didn't. Not out of trust, out of fear. Fear of confirming what the photo already suggested, that she had started living parts of her life where I didn't exist. The photo lied in the way all posed pictures do. It told the world a story of happy colleagues, harmless fun. But to me, it whispered something darker, that my wife's warmth had found somewhere else to go. And once you've seen a lie in a photo, you can never unsee it. 2 Fridays after the photo that said nothing, I found myself standing under dim Edison bulbs in a downtown bar that smelled like spilled citrus and old varnish. It was a coworker's promotion party, hers, not mine. And I went because that's what husbands do. You show up, you shake hands, you become a polite extension of your spouse's life. The place had a narrow brick spine and a row of high tops along the wall. Music pulsed just enough to make conversation an effort. She slipped ahead of me as soon as we walked in, sliding through the crowd like she'd trained for this. People called her name with the kind of enthusiasm that says, "I know who you are when you're not at home." I hung back near the bar and ordered a club soda, pretending it was a choice and not self-defense. He introduced himself first. "Evan," he said, with that grin men wear when they've never had to chase anything. I recognized him from the photo, the almost shoulder, the easy posture. In person, he radiated permission. Shirt sleeves rolled, jawline doing half the work. He stuck out his hand. I took it. He had the handshake of a guy who's never had to wonder whether he belongs. I told myself to be civil. I told myself I was imagining patterns because the human brain loves a conspiracy. I told myself I was here to celebrate my wife's career, not to audit the background of every picture I'd seen online. They gathered for a toast. Someone clanged a spoon on a glass, and everyone turned toward the end of the table. She was there, lit from behind by a neon sign that made the air look electric. She said something about teamwork and late nights and how grateful she was. People cheered. She smiled. Big, public, flawless. Then came the part I can't scrub from my memory. The crowd folded inward for congratulations, that messy carousel of hugs and cheek pecks and inside jokes. Evan stepped up for his turn. He put one hand at the small of her back, like he had a deed to it. She lifted her chin and went in for the social kiss that lives somewhere between polite and personal. Except they missed the cheek. Or maybe they didn't miss it all. It wasn't a long kiss. It didn't need to be. It was the kind that says, "We've done this before," or "We've practiced it in our heads enough to make it easy." Her fingers curled behind her shoulder for balance, which is what you do when your body forgets to be surprised. I didn't make a scene. I didn't throw a drink or announce myself like a bad movie. I just watched the space where their mouths had been and felt my ribs tighten one by one, like a set of bolts cinched with a torque wrench. Around us, laughter went on sale 2 for 1. Nobody looked twice. Because in rooms like that, if no one shouts fire, there is no fire. She found me a few minutes later, eyes bright, breath fast. She was smiling the way people smile when they've already decided how the conversation will go. "It was a dare," she said before I could speak, like she was stamping a receipt. "They always do that.
Promotions get the dumb dares. I hadn't asked a question yet. My silence must have sounded accusatory. She filled it with preloaded lines. "It's not a big deal," she added, voice lighter, as if tone could sand down facts. I looked at her and tried to locate the woman who once hated public displays because they felt performative. The woman who laughed into my collarbone in crowded rooms and dragged me outside where affection could be honest. This version of her wore different rules. I said very little, a simple "I saw," because the truth didn't need more syllables. Her smile thinned into something armed. "You're being dramatic," she said, quiet enough for only me. "It was a stupid dare. You can't still be mad about me flinching at home and now this? You're connecting dots that aren't there." Connecting dots that weren't there. What an efficient way to rename a picture. She went on about context, about how everyone was watching, about how that made it less intimate, not more. She suggested I was sensitive. She suggested I had misread angles. She suggested the bartender lights distort distance in photos and in life. Every time she said "just," the floor under us got slicker. Just a dare, just a game, just a kiss. The word did reps, bulking up until it could shove me off my own certainty.
I nodded once and let it stand. Not because I believed her, because the bar wasn't a courtroom, and I had no interest in winning an argument on a sticky floor. I wanted to catalog the feeling instead, the one that started in the center of my chest and spread outward with cold purpose. It wasn't jealousy, it was geometry. I could see the angles now. I could measure the distances we'd been pretending were invisible. She drifted back to her circle, buoyed by applause and the second round. I stood 2 stools away, nursing the ice melt in my glass, and watched them rotate around each other with the casual accuracy of planets. He laughed in her direction more than once. She answered with that half-turn body language that keeps everything almost deniable. It looked like flirting to anyone who still needed the word. On the way out, someone insisted on a group photo by the door. The flash hiccuped, everyone blinked. I saw it again, the way she positioned herself near Evan without actually touching him, the careful choreography of not quite. That's the thing about lies. They don't just live in sentences, they live in inches. In the cab, she leaned back against the vinyl and closed her eyes, like she'd earned sleep, like the night had simply been a marathon of small talk and not the quiet rebranding of our marriage. I stared at the meter and listened to the tires sizzle through puddles. My reflection in the window looked like a person watching a documentary about his own life. She reached for my knee once, an absent-minded pat that might have passed for tenderness from far away. I didn't flinch. I fossilized. Warmth requires a kind of faith I no longer had at my disposal. By the time we turned onto our street, I had recorded everything I needed. Not the kiss, that was almost irrelevant now, but the machinery built around it. The minimizing, the preloaded explanations, the way she treated my field report like fiction, and her alibi like gravity. What I didn't say in that car was a choice. Words can be gasoline in a tight space. I wasn't there to blow up. I was there to learn the layout of the flames. The first ride home after the bar taught me everything. The meter ticked, the wipers whispered, and we floated through the city like 2 strangers who happened to share an address. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes, as if sleep were a verdict. I watched the wet blur of taillights and kept my hands still. After that, every ride, cabs, Ubers, my truck, became a tunnel of silence. She scrolled, I drove. The air between us filled with things unsaid, until even the seatbelt chime sounded like a warning. When the radio was on, we let it stay on low. When it was off, neither of us risked turning it on. Music makes a claim. Silence keeps a secret. I learned the way her body spoke. Shoulders angled toward the window meant I had no access code. Knees pointed forward meant she was rehearsing her version of events. A hair tie around her wrist meant she wanted her hands free of mine. None of it was loud, but all of it was final. Outside the windshield, the city kept performing. Late buses kneeling at corners, yellow-lit kitchens flashing past, people laughing on stoops with an ease I couldn't fake. Inside, I counted intersections and breathed through red lights. I stopped asking if she was hungry. I stopped narrating the day. My voice made dense. Silence left no marks. In parking garages, the echo of our footsteps stacked on itself. We rode elevators with polite posture and separate reflections. At our door, she moved first, keys out, as if the lock might punish hesitation. I followed, carrying nothing but the weight of not touching her. Those drives taught me a new kind of math. Distance divided by time equals indifference. The longer we traveled, the less there was to say, until even a left turn felt like picking a side. By the fifth quiet ride, I understood. We weren't going home together. We were merely arriving at the same place. She didn't deny. She diluted. That became her strategy. Every conversation arrived pre-sanded. Just a dare, just a peck, just office culture. The word just did the heavy lifting, shrinking anything that hurt into something I was supposed to pocket and forget. If I mentioned the kiss, she repackaged it as a team bonding prank. If I referenced the recoil at home, she rewrote it as a long day and my bad timing. Facts turned into tone problems. My memory became the issue. I started noticing her toolbox. Only reframe scale. Everyone spreads guilt so thin it disappears. If you really loved me, relocates blame neatly onto the person bleeding. She used them like muscle memory. A rolled eye here, a sigh there, the practiced shrug of a person who's already filed the paperwork under no big deal. I kept my voice level and watched patterns instead. The more specific I got, the more abstract she became. When I described the angles of bodies in a room, she accused me of reading minds. When I stuck to timestamps and places, she accused me of policing. Her best move was mercy theater. I'm sorry you feel that way. A statement that apologizes to my emotions while absolving the actions that triggered them. Text threads read like a training manual in minimization. I'd write one sentence, "I saw what I saw," and receive paragraphs about context, crowd pressure, professional optics. She finally added the garnish. "Do you want me to be awkward at work because you're insecure?" There it was, the rebrand. Her choices as survival, my pain as control. The morning after one of those exchanges, I caught myself opening a notes app and logging things, dates, details, phrases, like a claims adjuster after a storm. Not to win a fight, but to keep from going crazy. Gaslighting doesn't erase reality. It erodes your footing until standing upright feels like stubbornness. By the end of that week, I understood the new rules. Nothing would ever be what it was. It would only be how I framed it. And in that semantic fog, betrayal could walk right past me wearing a visitor badge labeled harmless. Normal arrived like a script she printed overnight. Sunday morning pancakes reappeared, plated with berries. She narrated weekend errands in a bright tone, asked if I needed anything from the hardware store, left a sticky note on the fridge about recycling day with a smiley face that looked like clip art. In the afternoon, she posted a story from our backyard, sun on the fence, coffee in hand, captioned "Slow Sundays with my favorite person." I watched the little circle glint at the top of my phone and wondered which favorite person she meant. At work, she sent me a gif of a dog wearing sunglasses. At home, she brushed past me in the hallway and said, "Hey you," like we'd never fallen through a trapdoor. Her laughter was louder than usual, a kind of stage laugh that skims surfaces and never lands. When friends texted to plan a double date, she answered for us. "We're in." I stared at the word "we" until it lost its meaning.
Dinners became dioramas. Everything placed just so. She set the table, asked me about my day in a way that blocked any answer longer than 2 sentences, nodded at the parts that wouldn't require follow-ups. If I mentioned anything near the fault line, late nights, the bar, the kiss, she pivoted to weather or a sail on flights like a magician changing decks. The illusion depended on momentum. In the evenings, she'd slide onto the couch beside me with the space of a throw pillow between us. Legs tucked, phone up, show on. She'd laugh at the sitcom's canned applause, and occasionally pat my knee, the way people check for a wallet before leaving the house. The gesture said, "Look, see? Affection." The gap said, "Case closed." We entertained her family one night. She floated through the kitchen, refilling glasses, telling a funny story about a client who wanted a logo shaped like a pineapple. Her mother complimented our partnership. I rinsed plates and kept my hands busy, an extra in a production called "Fine, Thanks for Asking." When the door finally shut, she exhaled like she'd just finished a 5K, then smiled at me as if the medal should mean something. I matched her performance beat for beat. I handled the bills, fixed the dripping faucet, texted back promptly, folded towels the way she liked, edges in, not out. I learned how to nod at the right times and hold eye contact without letting much of myself show through. If she could build a life where nothing had happened, I could live in it without adding dialogue. That was the trick, not denial, presentation. She understood that people rarely interrogate a quiet room set carefully enough. I understood that a set is not a home. We became co-workers managing a calm brand. And in that curated quiet, something colder than anger settled in. The kind of stillness where glass looks like water until you try to drink. It didn't happen in a single breath. It happened the way a pond freezes. Clear water first, then a skin, then a thickness you can stand on if you don't mind the creak. I stopped offering the little mercies. No reaching for her hand in the grocery store, no leaning in when she brushed past. In bed, I learned the art of stillness. I faced the window and let the cold do its work. My body understood before my mouth admitted it. Warmth given to the wrong place becomes a debt you can't collect. I rationed words, logistics only. Package came, dogs fed, you have the car Thursday. My voice turned into a tool, not a bridge. She noticed, of course, and called it moodiness. I called it traction. Small separations multiplied. I bought a second set of towels and kept them folded on a different shelf. I moved my razor to the hall bathroom. I did my laundry at odd hours so our clothes didn't mingle. I locked my phone, not to hide anything, but to mirror the privacy she worshipped. I changed my routines. Earlier gym, longer runs, late-night drives to nowhere with the radio off. I learned how the city sounds at 5 a.m. Delivery trucks sighing, bakery doors unlatching, the liftoff of the day that doesn't require permission. The air felt honest out there. When friends asked how we were, I stopped auditioning for fine. I said we were busy, which is a coffin with Wi-Fi. I refused to defend what I didn't believe in. Defensiveness is a kind of prayer, and I had nothing left to worship. I kept a quiet ledger, dates, phrasing, the choreography of not quite. Not for court, for sanity. On a high closet shelf, I stashed a go bag, spare clothes, passport, a folder of essentials. The act itself cooled something in me. Planning is a temperature. By the end of that month, I wasn't angry. Anger needs friction. I had reduced us to ice, slick, load-bearing, unwelcoming. She could skate on the surface all she wanted. I was done falling through. It was nothing dramatic, just a Saturday at the farmer's market. Sky the color of dishwater, the air smelling like wet greens and coffee. We walked side by side without touching, two parallel lines pretending to share a path. Crowds thickened near the flower stalls, so I did what I've always done. I placed a light hand at the small of her back to guide her through. It wasn't a claim, just the old choreography of caring. Her spine snapped straight like a ruler. She stepped out of reach as if my fingertips were heat. No words, just that crisp refusal written in her muscles. I let my hand fall. A few steps later, a vendor she knew called her name. She brightened, leaned in for a hug that wasn't quick or awkward, and stood with her palm resting on his forearm while they joked about peonies. No flinch there, no "God, don't" under her breath. Touch wasn't the problem. I was. I paid for a bunch of basil I didn't want and watched her laugh with a softness I hadn't earned in months. The realization was clean, almost merciful in its clarity. I had become a body she avoided, a temperature she didn't tolerate. The market noise receded until all I could hear was the steady metronome of my own pivot. On the walk back to the car, I kept my hands in my pockets. At the curb, she hesitated, like she expected me to do the old routine. Open the door, steady her elbow, narrate the little kindnesses that make a life. I didn't. Metal clicked, she got in. I rounded to my side and drove us home with the radio low enough to hear the decision settle. There wasn't an oath spoken out loud, nothing to etch on a calendar. Just a quiet, final recalibration. I would not reach again. Not to guide through crowds, not to steady, not to test the temperature of the air between us. Whatever warmth I had left would be kept where it couldn't be mocked. Back at the house, I put the basil in a glass of water and watched it wilt anyway. It felt right. Some things collapse even when you do the steps correctly. Some vows die in public under a string of market lights. Mine did, without witnesses, the moment I understood that my touch had become an offense and her ease belonged elsewhere. It was the kind of proof you don't go looking for, the kind that finds you on a Tuesday because the city posted a street sweeper sign and I had to move her car.
I slid into the driver's seat, still damped from the drizzle, and hit the start button. The infotainment screen woke up in that soft blue glow, and a notification popped like a throat clearing. Recent destinations. I meant to ignore it. I didn't. Top of the list, Harbor Lights Hotel, 11:42 p.m. last week. Under it, the same entry again, Harbor Lights Hotel, 1:06 a.m. 2 weeks ago. The map thumbnail showed a neat pin by the river, a place with valet umbrellas and a lobby that smells like cedar. The nights matched the one she'd called late strategy sessions and team drinks that ran long. My hands stayed on the wheel, useless, while the screen quietly told on her. I backed into a spot across the street and sat there with the wipers ticking their metronome. I wanted to believe it could be anything else. Client meet at a hotel bar, a birthday nightcap, a wrong turn saved to history. Then the second proof arrived, ordinary as breath. When I came back upstairs, a bank alert sat on the kitchen iPad we both used for grocery lists and recipes. Joint card, $86.40, Harbor Lights Lounge. Timestamp aligned perfectly with the first strategy session. 2 champagne flutes on the transaction icon, as if the bank enjoyed curating the narrative. I didn't need a photo or a text bubble with hearts. I had coordinates and clock time. I had a bar charge in a lobby known more for anniversaries than brainstorms. I had repetition. Affairs aren't accidents, they're schedules. She wandered in a few minutes later, towel around her hair, humming. The apartment smelled like her shampoo, the one I used to confuse with comfort.
She chatted about her morning run, the rain, a podcast episode about time management. I watched her pass the island where the iPad sat. Her eyes didn't flick to it. Of course they didn't. People only look where they think fire might be. I didn't interrogate. Interrogation is a way of asking permission to know. I already knew. The confirmation didn't even stab. It cooled. Facts can do that. They make a clean edge where grief had been blunted. That evening, I had to shuffle cars again to dodge a ticket. When I started hers, the screen woke into the same blue, and for a second I thought I'd imagined the earlier entries. But the car remembered what it always remembers. Below the hotel pins, another breadcrumb. Saved favorite, office home. Then, saved favorite, gym. Sandwiched between the reliable pillars of her routine, the hotel sat there like a new habit that never asked for a label. On my way back upstairs, I noticed the smallest thing. The kind of thing you only learn to see after months of taking inventory. A hotel key card, paper sleeve peeking from the pocket of her gym tote, the corner smudged from being slid and pocketed and slid again. The sleeve read, "Room," with a blank line, left intentionally empty by a clerk who didn't ask questions. That was generous of them. I didn't have any either. I put the tote back exactly as I'd found it, and stood in the hallway while the dryer thumped its steady drumbeat. In another room, she was talking to someone on speaker about a design mock-up, laughing professionally, a sound polished to pass inspection. I leaned against the doorframe and watched the light under the laundry door flare each time the drum turned. It looked like a lighthouse, then a warning, then nothing at all. Confirmation didn't bring drama. It brought stillness. The story she'd been minimizing now had a street address, a timestamp, a bill. Betrayal had a pin on a map you could navigate to without directions. I didn't plan my next line. I didn't rehearse a speech. I folded the knowledge and slipped it into the quiet place where I kept my passport and the spare keys. Some truths don't need announcing. They require departure. I didn't confront. I packed. At dawn, the apartment was as quiet as the lie we'd been living. The dryer drum sat still. The basil in the glass had given up. I pulled the go bag from the closet shelf, added a stack of folded shirts, the ledger I'd kept, my passport, the folder of essentials. In the hall bath, I took my razor, my toothbrush, the second set of towels I'd quarantined weeks ago. Each absence made a small, honest space. On my phone, I rerouted my direct deposit to the account I'd opened the day I bought the go bag. I paused auto payments tied to me, set mail forwarding, screenshot what mattered, then logged out. No fireworks, no speeches, just switches flicked in rooms she never bothered to visit. I left the ring in the ceramic dish by the door, the one that used to hold our keys and pocket change and stray concert stubs. It looked heavier off my hand than it ever felt on it. Next to it, I set my key fob. The apartment would notice their weight before she did. I walked the rooms once more, not for sentiment, inventory. Couch, fine. Plants, watered. The photo wall, unchanged. Us, pretending. I didn't take a frame. Memory had already edited the album. When I rolled my suitcase down the hall, the wheels made the same soft sound hers once did on nights that ended late and came home louder than they should. The elevator arrived with an indifferent chime. In the mirror, I looked like a man transporting an artifact, my own life, carefully wrapped. At the curb, I loaded the truck and sat with my hands on the wheel until the streetlights clicked off. I texted my brother a single line. I'm out, I'm safe. Then I put the phone face down. No note for her, no explanation. She had written the only one that mattered in the way she recoiled, minimized, rehearsed, and scheduled. I was only returning her language. Silence. When I pulled away, the tires whispered over last night's rain, and for the first time in months, the sound didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a road. I didn't move into a dream. I moved into a box with light. A month-to-month walk-up with drywall seams you could trace, and a window that caught the morning like it was trying to prove something. It smelled like paint and new beginnings you have to assemble yourself. I set down the suitcase and stood in the empty room until the quiet felt earned. My life reassembled in clean lines. A mattress on a frame, 2 plates, 1 mug. Keys that only fit 1 lock. I switched to cash for a while. Small choices that made each day visible. I ran at dawn when the streets belonged to delivery trucks and dog walkers and people who needed air more than sleep. The cold, woke parts of me I had left idling. I told almost no one. My brother knew, the bank knew, the mail knew. Silence had been the language of my ending. I kept it as the language of my start. No posts, no explanations, no version for friends to vote on. Some stories you finish without an audience. What surprised me wasn't relief or rage. It was the absence of bargaining. I had lived there too long. Inside excuses, context, bright pancakes plated like alibis. Now the days were simple. Eat, work, move, rest. Grief arrived in small, manageable weights. An empty ring groove, the muscle memory of reaching for a light switch that wasn't there, the way basil wilts even if you change the water. I let each weight sit where it needed to and didn't build a shrine. I never texted her. I didn't need closure. I had coordinates and timestamps and a keycard sleeve. Truth had already done the closing. If her version reshaped itself in rooms I no longer entered, that was a weather report for a city I didn't live in. On a Sunday, I boxed the ledger and slid it to the back of the closet. The record had done its job, kept me upright while the floor shifted. I didn't need proof anymore. I needed space. Space is not forgiveness, but it's what forgiveness breathes. I kept one vow, finally. No more us. Not as a threat, not as revenge, but as hygiene. Love can be loyal to the wrong thing. Leaving is how you disinfect it. I wasn't the man who begged at kitchen islands or decoded background elbows and photos. I was the man who believed what he saw and acted accordingly. If there's advice in this, it is small and blunt. Believe the body before the story. Recoil is a sentence. Minimization is a map. When someone builds a silence around you and calls it normal, don't decorate it. Walk out. Take your name, your mornings, your simple objects, and go. You will not like the first week. You will need lists. You will repeat your address to yourself like a spell. And then, one day, you'll notice the coffee tastes like coffee again, not compromise. That's the whole ending. No stunt, no final text, no encore. A door closed, a road taken, a life repaired in plain sight. I kept my promise to myself. No more reaching where warmth refuses to live. No more us.